The US dollar makes up 59% of global currency reserves, dwarfing all others combined. Foreign banks park their wealth here, buying American debt. This demand lets the US run deep deficits and borrow at unmatched scales, turning the dollar into a geopolitical weapon. But there is a massive paradox at the core of this dominance. This global powerhouse is backed by absolutely nothing physical in the real world. To understand how an unbacked piece of paper managed to conquer the world, we must look back at how it first earned that trust, by mimicking a heavy silver reality. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the American colonies lived through complete monetary chaos. Actual cash was so scarce that colonists had to invent their own local forms of money just to conduct basic trade. They relied on raw materials to settle debts. Tobacco, beaver skins, and woven wampum bead belts served as the primary means of payment. The only money early Americans trusted was a foreign coin, the heavy, silver, Spanish-milled dollar. It was the global standard of the era. When the United States finally established its own monetary system through the Coinage Act of 1792, it didn't invent a new value from scratch. It legally defined the brand new US dollar to match the exact weight and silver content of that Spanish coin. At its inception, the US dollar was not a symbol. It was pure hard money, a system built entirely on physical reality rather than government promises. By 1861, the Civil War was tearing the country apart, and the Union government was facing crippling bankruptcy. The cost of waging the war was skyrocketing, and there was no money left to pay the soldiers in the field. To keep the army moving, President Abraham Lincoln took a desperate financial gamble. In 1862, his administration pushed through the Legal Tender Act. This allowed the government to print paper bills entirely out of thin air, with absolutely zero gold or silver in the vaults to back them. Because of the distinctive dark green ink on the back, they became famously known as greenbacks. This created a fiat currency, money whose value is dictated strictly by government law and the promise of the state, rather than any metallic worth. At the time, this was a massive shock to the public. It forced people to take a psychological leap of faith, trusting a piece of paper over physical assets for the very first time. The modern foundation of American fiat money began as a desperate wartime survival tactic, a temporary fix for a bankrupt government that eventually became the permanent reality. In 1944, as World War II drew to a close, delegates from 44 nations met at a hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. They were there to completely rewrite the global financial order. The United States executed a masterstroke. They convinced every nation to peg their currency directly to the US dollar. To ensure trust, the dollar alone was pegged to physical gold at exactly $35 an ounce. It felt like a safe bet to the rest of the world. Within years, the dollar became the ultimate reserve currency for the planet. But this was a golden trap. It anchored the entire infrastructure of global trade to the American financial system, making international commerce virtually impossible without the dollar. By the late 1960s, the illusion of infinite gold was cracking. The United States was funding the costly Vietnam War while expanding domestic social programs, and the bills were coming due. The mathematical reality was undeniable. America was printing far more paper dollars than it had gold in its vaults. Panic set in as foreign nations, led by France, began aggressively converting their paper dollars back into metal, rapidly draining American gold reserves to dangerously low levels. Facing a total collapse of the system, President Richard Nixon took to national television on August 15, 1971. He announced the temporary suspension of the dollar's convertibility into gold. This temporary measure became permanent. It completely severed the dollar from physical metal forever, finalizing its transformation into a currency backed only by economic trust. Nixon's gamble worked because the world was already too deeply entangled in the dollar-based infrastructure of Bretton Woods to walk away. This created the silent financial empire we see today. Foreign central banks park their wealth in U.S. assets, allowing America to borrow endlessly and deploy targeted sanctions against any nation it chooses. While challengers like the euro or the renminbi attempt to compete, they lack the deep, liquid capital markets required to dethrone the dollar's dominance. Stripped of its history and geopolitical weight, These notes are just pieces of paper. They function as money because of a shared psychological agreement. The American financial empire reigns supreme because the world collectively agrees to trust it. But as history proves, that trust is fragile, and no financial empire lasts forever.